This is the Course of Action podcast, available on Apple, Spotify, Good Pods, and your favorite platform worldwide. You can also stream new episodes on the Reeves Across America radio network every Monday at noon Eastern. Reeves Across America's mission is to remember the fallen, honor those who serve, and teach future generations the value of freedom. Zach, how you doing, man?
I'm doing well. Thank you very much for having me back on here. It's great to be back on and look forward to catching up.
Sure, yeah, and I'm glad like we said offline, we seem to catch you, pre and post desert and going off to work, and you did me a favor, and in the meantime, you even upgraded your background and your setup and all this stuff.
My Travis Bickle room that I'm renting right now.
Hey, it works, man. It works.
Yeah, I can't complain. And the good news is I don't foresee myself going away for work again anytime soon. I found myself a pretty solid gig here in Northern Virginia, so this should be easier to coordinate from now on.
Well, good, because you have a big year ahead of you. You got several books in the pipeline we're going to talk about here in a little bit, but it's good to kind of settle down and get things back where you can be available for podcasts and doing all this marketing and stuff that we know as authors, regardless of what level you're at, you have to do that.
Yeah. I honestly, that was one of the hardest parts about being overseas was when I'd have people reach out and be like, "Hey, what do I need to do to get a signed book?" And it was like, just wait till I get back. It's just the logistics and then having to go to the APO box and all that. I was like, I know it sucks. I know it's kind of a cop-out answer, but just wait for me to get back and we'll get you hooked up.
Oh yeah. And the cost to send it from, the Middle East.
Well, that's one good thing is, working on a base is the base post office is like a little US post office. So you're not paying the international shipping fees and all that. The biggest thing is you always just fill out a customs form and they have to check whatever you're sending.
So you can't put any sketchy stuff in there.
No. Unfortunately, the days of mailing back like grenade bodies and things like that are long gone.
Yeah, I had a bunch of buddies that were they were on the flight line working maintenance jobs and stuff like that back when Iraq and Afghanistan kicked off, and that was back when you could put stuff on the plane to send back home.
Yeah,
So I got buddies who have like real Turkish like rugs. And some real stuff that I think customs would probably catch and go, what's going on here?
Yeah, man, that's my one regret is I didn't buy a rug when I was in Afghanistan.
Yep. My brother-in-law has a bunch of stuff like that. He's been deployed 1 billion times, and
that's awesome.
He's got a bunch of stuff like that, and he bought like a real silk suit over there one time, like probably thousands of dollars. He looks really good in it, but he's like, I bought one suit. It's black.
I believe it.
And that's all. Only suit I'll ever need. I was like, that's pretty smart. And for like $100 too. Not like pennies compared to what it really cost here.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
I mean, I was like, that's smart. That's really smart. But yeah, I mean, so how have you been since we last talked? Did you deploy again? I think you were deploying right as we last talked.
Yeah, so I was so we talked, that was September of 2022, just to date things a little bit.
I think so.
And then I left to go to, and now that it's over and done with, I was in Qatar. I left in November and I was there. I did 6 months out there. Hit my 6 month mark, and I was sort of like, do I want to stay out here, do the full year? Do I want to find something else? And then another gig back stateside was really lucrative and will very, very easily become a good stepping stone in my career came. And so May rolled around and I was like, all right, I'm going back to the States. And now I'm 20 minutes from where I used to live when I was in Virginia. So I did 6 months in the desert. Did a whole lot of writing when I was out there, even though we were doing 12-hour shifts and all that. But in my off time, because I can never turn my brain off, I was like, I have these ideas, I need to get them out. And yeah, so I kept busy, but now I'm back and things are good. Just been nose to the grindstone with everything: writing, rewriting, editing, planning new things. I don't know if the camera's going to pick it up, but I got a little pocket notebook that I keep next to my bed. So at night when I have those ideas, I can wake up and scrawl it out and hopefully read it in the morning, like that one Seinfeld episode where he writes the perfect joke but he can't read it in the morning.
Yeah.
I've had a couple things like that where I'm like, I got to decipher my own chicken scratch handwriting. But and like you said, 2024, it's shaping up to be another dual release year. So very excited about that.
So to refresh my memory, what was the last thing you put out?
The last thing I put out was Occupant, which was supposed to come out Halloween Day of 2023, but because of a technical issue on Amazon's part through Audible specifically, it ended up releasing in August, which I wasn't too torn up about because I had chosen Halloween as just an arbitrary date of, oh, it's a sci-fi horror book. Why not put it out on Halloween? But I was very antsy to already get it out. So when they were like, oh, it's out, I wasn't too torn up.
What happened with Amazon?
I submitted. So my narrator finished all his chapters. He sent them in. I listened to everything. We made any changes that needed to be changed, and I submitted them for review to Audible just to make sure that everything was good. There wasn't going to be, hey, you've got to adjust the volume of this one, or this one isn't encoded to the proper amount, because it's all the technical stuff on the back end that's such a pain to deal with. And I submitted it and they were like, hey, it's all good. And also it's out. And I was like, oh no, I didn't want that second part. I just wanted it to be like blessed off and ready to go.
Right.
And I tried to retract it and it said it did, but it didn't. So then I was like, you know what? I've already got everything else queued up for the paperback and the Kindle. Let's just blast it out there. Let's give the people what they want. And it ended up being a really good reception. And I would go as far to say a really successful launch of a book in a whole new genre compared to what I'd put out previously.
Now, have you done Audible before, or was this the first Audible?
No, that was I've done Audible for all three of the Merc books that are out right now too.
Okay. So this was is the same guy who did it?
No, so this is a different narrator, a gentleman by Rob Dane, and he did a fantastic job. He did Occupant for the modern mercenary thrillers. That's Mr. Matthew Williamson. He's the one who did the narration for those three.
Okay. And with with Occupant, kind of your foray into horror, is that something you've always wanted to do, horror, or what kind of motivated the idea behind that? I know you're a big fan of like aliens and the sci-fi and stuff like that. And I saw you post something the other day about I think one of the new Alien movies that's coming out or show or something like that. And so, is this something you've always wanted to do?
Yes and no. Because, like you said, and like I've been very vocal about on social media, I've been a very big fan of that old school sci-fi horror aliens, the things. So I was about 11 years old when I saw Aliens for the first time, which terrified the hell out of me, but then I
Oh
fell in
yeah.
love with it. But to pull us out of that rabbit hole, the genesis of Occupant came in December of 2016 when the first trailer for Alien Covenant came out. And it came out, and I was so excited because it was a new Alien movie, and there really hadn't been one since Resurrection, or if you want to count the Alien versus Predator movies. And I liked Covenant, but it wasn't really an Alien movie. And I remember sitting there, and I was really in the weeds of getting everything set for Deception. I was on like the second or third to final rewrite for that at the time. And I was like, you know what? I want to take a stab at writing a book that's in the vein of these movies that I like. And so that's where I got my start with that. And I did a bunch of rewrites and a bunch of, and actually I didn't finish the first draft of that until I was in Africa, in East Africa in 2018. Um, I remember actually working on it on the plane over there just because it was such a long flight, because we made like 4 or 5 stops and I was just so bored. But I finished that probably about 3 or 4 months into that rotation, and then a couple more rewrites, a couple more edits, sent it out to some people, got their feedback from that. And then, in 2022, I was like, this is about, or 2021, I was like, this is about set. Let me start putting things in place to release it in 2022. And then I got delayed a little bit for that, just with a couple of things. And then last year, I was like, finally time to pull the trigger.
What has been your kind of reception to feedback when you send it out to folks? Because feedback can be so important
Mm-hmm.
to really kind of tailoring a story. This is my third podcast recording for today, and I talked to someone earlier today, and they said, feedback is about getting what the audience wants from you. And this guy works in film as well, and he's done some
Yeah.
big films. And he said, that's why they do test screenings before the movie even comes out, before they really start marketing it. They do test screenings because they might have 3 or 4 different endings and a couple of different things set up. And if like an ending doesn't land well, like it's got to go. Like they
Yeah.
don't care what this, like the studios do not care how well they love the certain ending and all these different pieces. Like if the audience walks out of the theater and says that part sucked, it sucks. It's got to go. And
Yeah.
that's why reshoots happen and stuff like that. And he said, like the feedback is not about you and your ego. It is 100% about what the audience thinks of it. And if you got to make a change, they'll tell you. So how important is like that feedback to you when you throw a new story out there like Occupant and you say, okay, guys, here it is. Here's my jump into this new genre. What is feedback like for you?
So just to make sure I understand the question really, what's my reception to the feedback I get when, now are we talking pre-release or post-release?
Pre-release.
So I take it very seriously for that, in that, because I want to approach it where, okay, what are people feeling for this? And I actually, one of the best pieces of feedback I got for that was in 2020. It was still kind of early on in the final part of the process, and I sent it off to another veteran author who had done sci-fi horror himself, military sci-fi horror, Ryan Esleeson, and he came back and he was like, "It's really good. You've got really good bones here. You need to flesh these parts out a little more. And this one character is kind of a Gary Stu. You need to make him not that." And I was like, "Well, I hate Mary Sue and Gary Stu characters, so I'm 100% going to make that change, and then I'm going to expand on what he said a little more." And then I've had other people come back and they were like, "Hey, I really liked it. It's very clearly a love letter to Alien," which I'm like, "That's great. That's what I wanted it to be, while still
Yeah.
being my own thing." So I guess to make a short answer long winded, feedback is extremely important when it's helpful, and when it comes to sort of the more technical application of writing, of, hey, I would have liked to see more expanded on this character's backstory, or hey, this character didn't really jive, or felt like he changed personalities a couple times, and and it didn't feel like the same person. And you know how that goes. That just comes from writing a project for so long, that, and our psychology goes into these characters, no matter how much we want to deny it sometimes.
Yes.
So when it's on that technical aspect, I really appreciate it. And thankfully, this hasn't been the case of any of the feedback I got. It's just like, "I didn't like this." I'm like, "All right, what didn't you like?" "Well, I just didn't enjoy that part." "All right, well, how could I improve it?" "I don't know." "Well, you're not giving me anything back at that point. So I've been extremely fortunate to have people, when I get feedback, there's always an explanation behind it, and therefore I'm able to take that, and even if it's just a tiny little tweak, or even just adding a little throwaway line to acknowledge their concern or
Hmm.
what they said about that, I'm more than happy to implement it.
Well, and I think feedback can be done just like that, just like you're saying. It doesn't have to be a total rewrite. There can be things that you do within a paragraph that kind of changed a point of view or changed the context in it. Like I'm in a critique group through ITW, and
Nice.
one of the feedbacks I got from like my very first chapter that I submitted to them was, it's outstanding, but you kind of repeated yourself here, but we know why. Like they could tell why, but they're like, if you read through it, you don't need to repeat yourself. It's just as simple as deleting these 2 sentences and
Yeah.
adding absolutely nothing. And I was like, okay. And then as I read through it, I was like, oh, okay, I see. I did repeat myself, not in the same way, in a very different way, almost from a different point of view. But I could see why to a reader that would be distracting. So for me as the writer, I thought, well, that's kind of important.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
from the reader, from the audience, they're like, oh, don't see the point in that. We don't need it. You already told us once. And like, okay. So it's like that second set of eyes, that feedback you get from people is so important because you write it the way you're hearing it in your head, and then it goes on to paper like that, but you're the only person who does that. There could be, if you sell a massive book, it could be several 100,000 copies. Those are different eyes that are all on it, so it means a lot to something different to them.
Yeah, that's I always like to think back to I forget who said it, but there was some interview of a famous author a while back. They're like, "Oh, well, how do you feel when people interpret your story different from how you intended to write it?" And it was basically summed up of like, once it's out there, it's for their interpretation. What I meant for the message to be no longer applies. Um,
It's true.
so, and so that's why I'm very, very cognizant to not get hung up when I do get that 1-star review or that 2-star review. They're like, I didn't like this part. It's like, well, what can you do?
Yeah, well, I think it's almost, you get that 1 or 2 star review. It's almost refreshing to know that somebody didn't like it, because at least that you're reaching all your audience. If it was perfect, you would kind of sit there and go, everybody loved it. There was not a single soul who had an
Yeah,
issue with this.
that or then everyone's gonna be like, he's buying 5-star reviews.
Exactly. Yeah, that's another thing too. Like, you see nothing but perfect reviews, and you go,
Yeah,
I want to see. I look at products on Amazon all the time, and I look and
oh
compare
yeah,
stuff, and I don't want to see a perfect 5. I want to see
yeah.
that 4.3, that 4.4. Some people didn't. But then again, sometimes you have people who are like, "Hey, my box came in broken, 1 star."
I hate
It's
that.
like,
Or like, oh, there
it's
was
not my fault.
there was a syrup thing on the book. 1 star. It's like, this isn't about the book. That's about Amazon.
Yeah,
I
Amazon
can't
almost needs to.
stand when I see those reviews, especially
Yeah,
on books.
yeah,
Oh, the cover was creased, 1 star. Like, that's not a reflection of the author. That's just
no,
the distribution
yeah.
problem.
It didn't come from my house. I didn't pack it myself. Like, it's not my fault, man. Like, relax a little bit. But yeah, I see that stuff all the time, and not just on books. I'll see it on other things. Like, my box
Oh
came
yeah,
in broken, 1 star, and I'm like, was the product okay? Was it broken? They
yeah.
don't mention nothing about that conveniently. They're just mad
No,
about
no,
their
not at
box. So,
all.
like, you're mad about the cardboard box that you already threw away in the trash can? Like, come on. I use them in my garage to clean up oil stains and paint and stuff like that. Like,
Yeah, there you
I
go.
don't care about the box, man. I care about the product, but geez, it's ridiculous. It's
Yeah, it
absolutely
really is.
ridiculous. So since you've been here last, the modern mercenary series has kind of picked up more steam than it had before. You have Deception, you have Wet Work, and then you have All In. And I think Wet Work and All In were something that I think you were coming out with the last time we talked. Where has the modern mercenary series kind of gone since we last chatted?
Yeah, so when we last chatted, Wet Work had just come out that year. I think like 3 or 4 months prior. And then All In came out May of 2023. So I'm gonna try to do my best to talk around anything spoilerish for anyone who hasn't gotten too far into the series. But
Well, I'll
it's
tell you
a
what, spoiler alerts. There you go. You've been
all right.
warned.
There we go. Spoiler alerts for Wet Work and All In. So it picks up almost directly after Wet Work ends, about a week after. So there was a couple of month break between Deception and Wet Work. All In, it's right off the bat, and it's because Morgan has just recovered from the wound sustained in Africa in Wet Work, and Alex is still in New York after dealing with the events that introduced him to Dimitri, who surprisingly became quite a fan favorite, and I'm very happy to hear
It's good.
a lot of people like Dimitri. So and they got to rescue Vinny. They got a cryptic text showing that Vinny has been yoked up by an unknown group, who turns out to be Omega, and they got to go rescue him. And then from there, after they pick him up, they continue their hunt to try to clear their names, and it's very easily the most action packed, and I'm gonna say darkest of the series, because the guys are not in a good place as this book goes on. they've been on the lam and going to ground for, let's see, because that one starts in September of 2018. So they've been going for about 3 months at the beginning, where they've been declared dead, but they've been blamed for the terror attack at the end of the first book, and they're sick of it. They're like, we want our lives back, and especially Morgan after what happened to Julia in the second book. So the gloves come off because they've realized that there are no rules that their adversaries are playing against, so they're not going to have any rules themselves. And a couple of the guys look into the abyss and they almost don't come back because of it. Um, but it does end on a high note, where even though the threat is still out there, the people who were responsible for everything are still at large. Their names get cleared, and they are able to return back to mostly normal lives. And that's where I'll keep it. And that's I guess we can end the spoiler alert here,
Yeah.
for that. But that's how it came. That's how it progressed in book 3. And I guess I can use that as a very quick segue into book 4 and sort of the official announcement for this, where the book 4 in the Modern Mercenary Thrillers is actually the first book that opens into the Modern Mercenary shared world. And I'm gonna, even though I didn't know they were going to do this at the time when I was doing first drafts for all this, I'm going to attribute this to Andrews and Wilson and how they sort of split from Tier 1 to Sons of Valor. Uh, Even though those are in the same universe and they're kind of siloed apart from each other, I'm going to keep mine in one, but it'll just be thriller versus shared world thriller. So there are a couple of returning characters for book 4, but it's mostly a new, and the returning character is a side character that was introduced in Deception for a very short scene. But he's a main character now that follows a new group of special operations and federal agent guys, and it opens up the world to some new units, some new characters, and some new threats that will tie together later on in the series. That's what I'll leave it at with that.
Okay, so is book 4 coming out this year?
This April.
2024, this April. Is the title yet,
Yep.
or have you not revealed it?
Yeah, so the title, I've actually got an advanced copy here. The title is Cazadores, which is Spanish for hunters. Mainly because I couldn't think of a cooler one in English. So I was like, I'm just going to stick with this.
Yeah.
I will say it's significantly shorter than the other 3. It's clocks in at, I think, 180 pages. So it's much shorter. It's almost pulpy in how it was written compared to the other ones, which I didn't intend at the time, but I couldn't figure out how to really flesh out a whole 300 to 400 page story with this. If I really wanted to, I could have, but I wanted it to be a little more punchy. And so, as you can see, it's pretty short. But the few people who read their advanced copies really enjoyed it, and they said that the punchiness worked well. And the way I structure the story sort of lent itself to be short and punchy and pulpy like that, because it's basically a rescue mission where they're like, we got to go now.
Okay.
And so, and because it's a very limited timeline, they're like, we have a general idea where they are. We got to figure it out. And then things just escalate from there.
So where is the Modern Mercenary series going after book 4?
So we're going to books 4 and 5 are more focused on cartel threats in South America. And they're they're less, at least book 4 is less mercenary and more SOF and special operations within the federal government focused. Book 5 goes back to bringing in mercenaries, but it's not Alex, Morgan, and Vinny. Although there may be a couple of cameos in book 5. You guys will have to wait and find out. And then after that, it expands to actually following some Army Special Mission Unit types and how they are combating threats that end up linking back with Omega and some of the threats established in the original trilogy before. There's one book that I hate that I'm forcing myself to wait so long to put it out because I've already written the first draft and I think it's going to be phenomenal. I've taken to referring to it as my Avengers book for the series because it
Nice.
takes the main groups from the first three, this second group, and then the special mission unit guys, and it brings them all together and that's like the culminating book in the whole series. And that one I'm so excited about, and I hate that I'm forcing myself so long to wait it, but I think the build up
Yeah.
would be worth it.
That's cool. That's really cool. Let's kind of move away from books for just a minute and let's talk
Mm-hmm.
more about operations, which is something that you are in and you know a lot about. Um, what do you think of this Ukraine situation with Russia? We're going on 2 years now. A lot of boots on the ground, a lot of help from outside of Ukraine and Russian forces. What does the optic look like from like on the ground? What is actually going on? What is your take on that?
Well, I will be 100% transparent and say that uh, even when it kicked off, where I've been involved has not really been Ukraine focused. A lot of stuff that I've worked some Central Asia stuff, but it was more obscure areas than Ukraine. They were affected by some of the sanctions on Russia, but I don't know. I was fully in the camp that I thought that the Ukrainians were going to get steamrolled within 5 days, like everyone else did,
Yeah.
and then they lasted a lot longer. And I was like, wow, this is unexpected. And then to watch and see, and it's been really interesting to see how Ukraine has capitalized on the training and the support and the materiel brought in from outside militaries and outside forces in implementing that in how they've combated Russia. But I, even though my job is to sort of try to figure out and read the tea leaves and all that, I don't know what direction it's going to go in. I think that it's going to end, and of course, this is just my personal assessment. This isn't from any intelligence or anything that I've read or been
Right.
involved with. I think that there's no way it ends not politically in some kind of armistice, ceasefire, whatever. Because I don't think Russia has currently. I don't think they have the capability to roll in and take Kiev. But I also don't think that the Ukrainians have the capabilities to continue this fight indefinitely.
No. Oh
Um,
no. And I don't think we as a country have the patience, or I don't want to say, how do I say this? I don't think we have the satisfaction in continuing to financially support it.
well, no, I mean, of course not. I mean, I know I'm all about fighting the good fight, but when I
Hmm.
see a new bill goes through that we're sending 600 billion to Ukraine, I'm just throwing a number out there, but 600 billion to Ukraine, I'm like, great. How much of that is going to raise my taxes next year?
Right. Yeah. And I
Um,
want to support them certainly, but at the same time, I'm like,
yeah,
okay, if this is going to be the norm, let's talk sensible here. And what do they really need? Is the money being accounted for? How are we truly helping? Are we
yeah,
just throwing money out the window? Like, I think a sensible talk like that is perfectly fine, and it's not saying you're against anything. Because I think the minute you start questioning it is the minute people start saying, "Oh, you don't support Ukraine, you don't
yeah,
support
yeah.
Israel, you don't support Palestine." It's like, whoa, never said that.
Yeah, unfortunately, the nuance in these arguments has basically gone out the window for 99% of people.
Yeah, no, no. I totally want to support them. Like, you call my number right now, I'll go over there and help. Absolutely, but like, well, let's be honest here. Like, how much of this is funneling and fueling into the military industrial sector? How much of this money is going
Yeah,
to waste? Like, I think there's a lot of sensible questions behind it that are perfectly okay to ask. We asked them of Iraq and Afghanistan, and rightfully so. But I think it gets to a point where it's like, okay, because I thought the same thing too. I thought, well, if Russia's military is as mighty as they claim it to be, man, they're going to roll through there and just take Ukraine. And
that was the biggest surprise out of this whole thing was
yeah,
that this giant the bear that we've been worried
yeah,
about that it's been growing since the end of the Cold War and how they curb stomped in Georgia and Chechnya the first time, although they did get their asses kicked a little bit in Chechnya the second time. Yeah, I thought for 100% that Ukraine was going to be Georgia 2.0.
oh yeah,
They were gonna roll in, clean up, and then have their little enclaves, which I guess they had from 2014 on. They had their little enclaves and exclaves throughout. But yeah, that was the biggest thing that was surprising. Was it was like, oh man, they lasted a week, then they lasted a month, and now we're at 6 months, now we're at a year, now we're at 2 years, almost
Mm-hmm.
three.
Yeah.
you know?
Like, well, hold on, what's going
But
on
I'm
here?
sorry,
Like,
I'm sorry, almost two.
yeah,
I
like
got my my dates confused. I was
it
also
seems
thinking
like forever.
it really does. Yeah.
Well, and it just kind of makes you go, is Russia really not as mighty as they said they were, or are they holding their cards back? Because like in sports, they say, you don't want to show all your cards because when you play next week, you don't want to show all your, you show
Yeah.
your next opponent what you really got. You don't want to show them all the trick plays. Is Russia doing that, or is Russia actually kind of getting it served to them more than they thought they would?
See, I don't know because that was what I thought initially after like the first probably about the month of the conflict, because you were just seeing these Russian soldiers and their tanks and their aircraft were just getting smacked, and I was like, are they like sending forward like the C team and then they're gonna come and just blitz through with like their best guys? But then it just kept going and kept going, and we kept seeing the Ukrainians just get victory after victory, and of course we had stalemates, and at a strategic level, not much has changed at this point. Probably, I'd say the last 12 to 18 months, lines haven't shifted too much and all that. So I don't know. I don't know what Russia's thing is at this point.
I don't either.
Um, and especially because a couple of years prior to the invasion, well, the re-invasion, because the invasion happened in
Yeah,
2014.
this is
People
not the
like to
first time.
conveniently
Yeah.
forget that.
Yes.
I remember reading, I think it was in like 2016, 2017, there was this big article that came out about how Russia was restructuring its military entirely to get away from the old school Soviet Cold War style, these big giant brigades and whatever the hell their echelons are called. I can't remember off the top of my head right now. And they were moving almost to a more air mobile style, kind of similar to what we do, air assault, fast move in. You hit a target and then you move back, and then you can reinforce it with other. I'm blanking.
Other forces,
Whatever.
other
Yeah, other
support.
forces. I was blanking on the proper doctrinal word, but I can't remember it right now. Um, and so I thought that might have had something to do with it, but then just how they threw all their tanks in and all that, I mean, what should have been their version of the Thunder Run when we rolled into Iraq in 2003,
Mm-hmm.
or like what they did in Georgia in 2008. And it just didn't happen. And then it went into trench warfare. It's just like, this is unprecedented. Um,
It's definitely an old school style of combat. It's not
it is. It
with a
really is.
with a sprinkle of some modern stuff. They're
Yeah,
using
those
drones and things
freaking, yeah,
like
I was gonna
that.
say the
Yeah,
freaking drones. That's some
yeah,
scary. That's what worries me the most out of this whole thing. Is now that's going to be. I mean, we were starting to see that in the Middle East in some areas, but now that's going to be commonplace. You buy $150, DJI drone, strap a bomb to it, and there you go.
yes.
You don't have to, and you just detonate it when you're over the guy. That scares the hell out of
Oh yeah,
me.
yeah, me too. Like, well, we were using Predators and Reapers, costing $1 million and two a piece, and
Yeah,
dropping $500,000 Hellfires from it. Like we were using some serious stuff. These guys are using stuff from Radio Shack,
yeah,
and like
and they're
that's
using it effectively. That's what's
effectively,
scary.
yes, and uploading it to YouTube the same day. I mean, that's horrifying.
Well,
And
what was it? There was like a crowdfunding thing. I think it was last year where it was like for $50, they'd like write your message on, on a bomb that they would then drop on the Russians. And they raised like a bunch of money doing that.
no way.
Yeah, I remember reading about that somewhere.
That's funny. I think it ends. I think it ends politically, but I don't know. I don't think it ends before this next election. I don't think.
I
I
think
think it. I think it
I
ends
agree with
after.
that. I
I don't
agree with
think.
that because I
I don't think it can end. I don't think. Well, I don't think President Biden can end it before November. I think he might publicly try to or advocate for it, but I don't think he'll be able to. Um, I think if Trump is the Republican nominee and he wins, then I think he has the ability to end it. Um,
I could see it.
if he gets elected, or he also has the ability to maybe prolong it or make it worse. I don't know.
I mean, hey,
um,
like General Smedley Butler wrote, "War is a racket," so it could go either way.
it could, and I think what's going to break the camel's back is if NATO votes Ukraine in.
Oh, absolutely. That will 100% be, and I don't know what Russia's response will be, but because Ukraine is the buffer between NATO and Russia right now, and that was the whole reason that Ukraine was always sort of in that gray zone of like, are they allied? Aren't they? We don't really know. But yeah, if that gets voted in, who knows what direction it will go in at that point.
Yeah, I think, I had some arguments with some folks a while back about, well, if Putin was really serious, he would use nuclear weapons on Ukraine and he would just go in there and take it. I said, well, you use a nuclear weapon on a territory that you want. It's not exactly the smartest method of taking over because you've damaged a lot of land and a lot of property by using a nuclear weapon. Um,
Well, of
and
course, it also goes into if it's a tactical low yield nuclear device or something. There's, regardless, you're right. Yeah, why are you getting that's cutting off the nose to spite the face.
right, it's like saying I'm gonna go visit this beautiful place by blowing it up first, and then I'm gonna go live there and establish
Yeah,
myself there. It just doesn't pass the common sense, that sniff test. So
yeah.
I kind of say to those people who say that, say, well, I think you'd have to push him back into a corner to get him to do that, but you'd also have to get him to accept the fact internally that Ukraine is worthless to him if he does that. Once he does it,
I mean, it wouldn't surprise me at that point if, say, Ukraine did get voted into NATO, if Putin did light off a couple of tactical nukes, if anything, just to establish a, hey, basically a fucking dead zone to,
yeah,
to keep, okay, NATO's going to be on that side. Here's the radiation, and then we'll be over here.
right. He just bombs the border, just bombs his own border, and says, "Now nobody's getting in or out."
Yeah,
There you go. I still win. That would kind of be smart. Probably kill a lot of people, but it'd be smart. Putin
yeah,
scares me. Putin scares me because I just don't know
yeah,
what he's truly capable of and what he's willing to do. Because what he showed so far is that he's willing to invade a country that was vulnerable,
yeah.
and that country had no big allies that were going to step in and do a
Well,
whole
or so
lot,
we thought.
or so we thought. Yeah. So he kind of took a small gamble, in my opinion, by going in. Especially, it was also opportunistic too. He happened
Oh,
to
yeah.
do it when we got a new president who wasn't nearly as bold and kind of have that bravado and that kind of that loose cannon type of mentality. So opportunistic kind of time, but at the same time, it also worries me that when is that going to not stop someone?
Yeah. Yeah, and the problem is, unfortunately, I left my mind reading hat out in Qatar, so I can't tell you.
Yeah. So let's talk about 2024 projects. You got the
All right.
Modern Mercenary book 4 that's coming out this
Yep.
April, and it's going to expand the world of the Modern Mercenary series with a lot of great things to come, as we talked about earlier. But you also have another project due out this year. Let's hear a little bit about that.
Yeah. So this is actually the first big true announcement for this. So that is coming out in November, and that is this chunk of a book right here, called Persona Non Grata. This is a story that, when it releases, will have been in the works for about 12 years at that point,
Wow.
through many, many rewrites and revisions and adding whole new, like that was my biggest project I worked on when I was overseas, was doing the final rewrite for this, where I added a whole new C storyline to it. Um, and the best way to describe that is, so it's a modern day crime novel, written from the perspective of the criminal. It's very, very mafia focused. So I'd say the best way to sort of sum it up would be Miami Vice meets Heat meets The Sopranos.
Okay. That's a lot.
It's a
That's a lot
it's
to
a
unpack.
big book.
Yeah.
I think
Oh,
it caught.
show me again. It was thick. It looks like a brick.
There you go.
Yeah. How many pages is that clocking in at?
I think it was like, I think so. I actually had to reduce it because Amazon was like, it's too big. We can't print it. Because
Really?
when it was at font size 12, it was at 500 something pages.
Wow.
So this final version, which is at 10 point and a 6x8 paperback, it's only available in, I'm sorry, hardback. It'll only be available in hardback and in Kindle because it was just too flimsy for how big it was in paperback. But this clocks in at 479 pages.
Wow. Wow.
I think I broke 250,000 words right in that one.
Wow. Did it hurt your heart when you had to cut it?
Uh, no, not really. Because it's still got all the content. It just wasn't going to be even bigger, which I kind of like the idea of being like, "Hey, check out this brick of a book. I wrote this."
That's very cool. So that's gonna. When did you say it's coming out? You have a date
November of
yet?
2024.
November of 24, and that
Yeah,
is I just blanked.
Persona non grata.
Yeah, and that is new, right?
Yep, that is a completely standalone. It's not even going to be a series. It's just a one-off crime novel. Um, but
Okay.
who boy is it not a doozy?
So spoiler free. I know you kind of gave us the comps there: Miami Vice, Heat, and
Sopranos.
Sopranos. Uh, Quick little elevator pitch, spoiler free, to give people a tease of why they should stay tuned for that one.
Yeah, so it follows main character Dominic Santorini as he is pulled back into a life that his father, who was a mobster, tried to get him to avoid. And he's pulled back into that life from being a petty criminal on his own due to some ghosts from his past reaching out in a way that he thought never would be possible. And it pulls him back and it inadvertently puts him back on the radar of some very powerful people who you they're the kind of people that when you're in that life you don't say no to. And from there it just escalates and he reconnects with some other people from his past who may or may not have been criminals with him, and he it points him in the direction of a couple of individuals who took everything from him as a child and that, or as a child and teenager. And so he's like, well, you know what? I've got the resources behind me now. I'm going to make things right for myself, not to make the world a better person. The main character of this is not a good person at all. I'm going to put that right off the bat.
I like that though. I like it when the main character is not the cliche good guy,
I can't
innocent.
stand it. I can't stand it.
I
Yeah.
like it when they got a
It,
flaw, they got an ulterior motive, something that ties them to questionable acts so that they're not so pure. I like
yeah.
that.
Oh, yeah. No, there's very few pure characters in this book.
Well, Sopranos and Miami Vice and Heat, that's a pretty big comp, man. That's a lot to look up to. I think those are all great series. Um, what did you think of the second Heat? Did you read it?
I did, and I have kind of a controversial opinion on it. It seems so. I really enjoyed the flashback sequences where it's the whole crew again, and they're working, and of course you've got Pacino's character running around trying to get the basically Wayne Grow .5 in that. I really enjoyed those parts. But then the parts that took place after the movie, where Chris is down in where is it, like Paraguay or Portugal, and all of a sudden he's like a tech expert, and those parts didn't land for me. But then again, when they go back and they're doing the big car heist and it's intersecting again with Pacino's character and all that, I like the flashback parts where it's the whole crew. The whole Chris techno thriller portions of it I wasn't a fan of personally.
Okay, that's fair. Everybody's got their opinion. That's fair. So before I let you go, let's get a couple more questions in.
Yeah,
What's
absolutely.
Zach James' favorite piece of gear right now?
Favorite piece of gear right now, are we talking just the whole gambit, or are we talking specifically like kit, or well, because I've
Mm,
got a lot of favorite pieces.
let's talk. Let's talk EDC first.
EDC. I'm just gonna go with a Glock 17 Gen 5 MOS. It's a solid, reliable handgun that you can throw a red dot on, and it makes it just that much easier to shoot.
Okay. Let's talk overall kit.
Overall kit, I'm gonna go with, and I'm gonna completely butcher the name of it because it's a Finnish company, but it's let me pull up the website real quick so I can actually pronounce it correctly. Uh, of course, I don't have it on this. Varusa Kela. I don't know how to pronounce it, but it's a Finnish company. They make a level 4 um, smock. That's so they make an OD and then some obscure Finnish camouflage and maybe black. But it's this smock that's got the 4 pockets on the chest and the 2 on the arms. It's actually featured in one of Grand Thumb's Becoming Deadly in the Mountain videos when he's wearing that OD smock jacket. It's got the 2 Velcro strips, but it's got those big survival pockets. I got my hands on one of those recently,
Nice.
and I absolutely love it. That thing stays in the truck and goes everywhere with me because that is just a great piece of survival and tactical kit.
Okay. Go to knife to carry daily.
Go to knife to carry daily. I have I've got it right here. It's a I don't even remember what brand it is. It's a Kershaw Speed Safe, I think it's called. I got it for like $40 at Cabela's.
Those are the
Um,
best knives.
exactly. I'm not gonna cry if I lose it. That's why
Right.
So I can open letters with it. I can do whatever I need to, and if it falls out of my pocket, I'm not gonna be heartbroken. Like if I lost one of my Winklers. So
Yeah. I got a bunch of Benchmades that I got when I was on active duty. We seem to buy a knife and a Leatherman every single year out of the unit funds. And I still have a bunch of those lying around that I carry around with me that I keep my nice knives at home. And I'm like, well, if I lose one of the government issued ones, like, I
yeah,
didn't pay for it.
exactly. Yeah,
I didn't pay for it. That's the best part about having them still is that it's like, well, I don't want to lose it, but if I do, at least I didn't pay for it myself because
yeah.
that's the
It's you never
worst.
want to lose these things, but oh no, I lost a $20 knife versus I lost my $250 custom ordered Winkler that had the inset and
Yes.
all that. It's like no, you don't want to lose that. That's a mantelpiece right there.
Yeah, when it costs some serious coins, like, hey, yeah.
Yeah.
Buddy's like, "Do you got a knife on you?" And I'm like, "Nope." I
Yeah.
don't want you running off of that.
Well, when I go into work because I work in a federal building, I can only have our knives are only like they can only be like 3 inches. I'm like, I'm not buying a little. I'll just ask someone else if they have
Yeah,
one.
exactly.
Which of course I get guff for all the time from this one guy I work with. He's a retired SF colonel, and he's like, "I'm disappointed you don't have a knife on you right now." And I'm like, "Come on, man! Like we work in an office. I don't need."
Yeah. All right, man. Well, before I let you go, tell everybody where they can find more about you and stay tuned to the new releases this year.
Yeah, so the main place to go to find to reach out to me and also to get updates on things going on is on Instagram at author Zach James. Zach spelled with an H the proper way. Um, I just recently got back on Twitter. I've had a Twitter for a while, or X, whatever the hell it's called nowadays.
Yep.
But I never really used it because I couldn't really get the hang of it. But I figure I'm going to use that to start posting extra stuff, maybe do polls or giveaways on top of Instagram. Same thing at author Zach James. And then if anyone who doesn't have social media but wants to reach out to me directly, just author Zach James at gmail.com. I will get back to you as soon as possible, but I do answer every email.
All right, brother. Well, thanks for coming on. Appreciate you catching up and taking the time. I wish you the best of luck on the two releases this year. I'm looking forward to both of them. And again, man, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to the next time.